Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, one and all. Boy, oh boy, do we have a treat for you this evening. You are tuned in to Toga Motorsports, and in particular, we've got the Pro Series lined up for you. That's right, the fastest, the quickest, the most consistent drivers in the community ready to duel it out. So who comes out as top dog. This is round number 2 of the championship. If you joined us last week at Paul Ricard, you will have had a fantastic time. I've got no doubt of that. If you didn't join us, all of the race is, of course, available over on YouTube, so you can catch up with that. Don't catch up with it yet, however, because this week we are headed across to Austria. We're at the Red Bull Ring, 10 corners worth of overtaking possibilities is what this is going to be all about. Of course, we've got championship standings. We'll bring you those in a moment or two. But the one thing that we've kept an eye on is that for those who don't know, here at Toga, we tend to use the LFM, Low Fuel Motorsport Balance of Performance figures, and they result in all of the cars being very, very close together on optimal lap time. This week, however, whilst it will result in cars being very, very close together, the Red Bull Ring is, of course, an inherently, what should we say, lopsided circuit. It's very much towards one end of the cars. So there's going to be some cars that love it, some cars that aren't such a fan. That means that, for example, the McLaren has got 21 of kilos of ballast added in. We've got 26 kilos of ballast added to the BMWs, a bit added to the Ford Mustangs, and then notably, nigh on 20 kilos taken out of Ferraris, Porsches, and Aston Martins as well. So expect to see the cars out there setting some quick laps all next to each other, but quite probably in different parts of the circuit to what you would normally expect to see. This is Josh Wood. Josh Wood, one of the Toga Racing Academy drivers, so we know him well, having raced in the rookie season last season for that, of course. So he was in Rookie Wednesdays, season number 13, had a solid go at that one and is now graduated up into the Pro Championship. A couple of other drivers that have followed that path through our field as well. If you look down somewhere, you'll find Martin Varga, and this is Fabian Guilot. Fabian won the race over at Red Bull Ring, and that means that he is currently leading our pro standing. So he's going to be one to keep an eye on here. And as we mentioned, the balance performance does bring that Aston Martin into a pretty happy window where, to be honest, it's not always the favoured car at the Red Bull Ring. This track, of course, been around since about 1970 when it replaced, ironically, a very flat circuit down the bottom of the hill that used runways, much like the original versions of Silverstone did. They decided that wasn't too exciting, however, and built a racetrack into the mountain. It always gets a little bit chaotic on the warm-up laps here, on the build laps towards the Flyers, as the drivers head round what is ultimately going to be the shortest lap on our calendar. As we said, Fabian Guilot leading the championship. He's followed by Jakob Knudsen and Sergei Tamara in the pro setup. Of course, there is also the semi-pro standings. Over on that side, it's Sepe Laguin, Konrad Wazowicz, and Gabriel Schmidt in your top 3, following on from Paul Ricard. Here we go, starting a lap, however, with the 997 Aston Martin, and it will give you this first view of what is a fantastic Austrian lap. Not much of it, only 2.6, 2.7 miles or so, but turn number 1 named after the great Niki Lauda. Get the nose in. And on a lot of these cars, Aston Martins, BMWs, Fords, all of those, you'll be taking huge chunks of curbs. Cheeky dose of slipstream, albeit the BMW wasn't going very quickly, as you help yourself up towards turn number 2. Steep gradient, about 12% here as you hit the brakes, which means the car will slow down very, very quickly indeed. Touch wide of apex for Fabian, that's A-okay, because it actually means you're on the flatter part of the road as you get on the traction, and you can get your pedal to the metal that little bit sooner. Downhill braking now at turn 4, so the opposite of 3, you need to be on the brakes that touch earlier. Get the nose in nice and early because the cars will tend towards understeer, and then once you've got the rear underneath you, it's settled, you're back on the power once again. Through 4, through 5, now you've got the first left-hander at 6, and it's going to lead into another one, so you want to brake pretty hard initially, get that rotation into the car, and then you're accelerating out towards turn number 7 to bring another fast flat-out section afterwards. So it's all about the exit despite the long, long radius. Bit of a slipstream for Fabian here as well, as you see that red car up in the distance, and he's only got 2 corners to go. This one, Jochen Rindt turn number 9, out towards track limits on the right, then get it into 10 and accelerate all the way up to the line. We've had a benchmark set up the top of a 1:27.9. Where does Guilot go? He does a 1:28.7, so a bit of time to find. That benchmark for reference set by this man at Jakob Knudsen in the number 20. He was P2 at Paul Ricard. He's P1 on the first set of qualifying laps. And a lot of Nissans in the field on spot as well. We've got, I think, 3 of them here this evening. So I'm curious to see how they got on. 2 of them in the top 5, actually, which makes it one of the most successful cars on that first set of laps. So then, now we can settle. We've got those bankers in. Still over 10 minutes remaining in this session, which at some circuits, you think of Spa, for example, that's a long lap there. And so already you'd be thinking, well, if I do a cool lap followed by another push, I'm running out of time. Here at Red Bull Ring, not a factor. The lap time's under 90 seconds. And so you've got time to reset, get your tires back in the zone, possibly get yourself into the pits, and then accelerate onto another one. Jakob Knudsen that we're looking at right now, that number 20 McLaren, on a good lap. Did set that initial benchmark, dropped down to 3rd, but he's up by a quarter of a second or so as he uses all of the road on the exit of turn 10. Can't quite get back up to the top, but does move on to the provisional front row. All of these tweaks and changes have pushed Fabian Guilot back down the order. Fabian himself trying to move up it once more. He's almost a second up on this lap, so he ought to jump a long way up, and does. 3rd position for the 997 Aston Martin Vantage V8. Now, before we get to the business end of the session, it's worth touching on how the lap time's generated here at Red Bull Ring. Of course, long straights, so it's going to be about straight line performance. But whilst top speed may come to mind, there's 2 other factors we've got to consider as well. The first one is going to be traction off of the corners. These big front-engine cars have the weight over the nose, and so sometimes they're prone to that oversteer on exit. That's going to heat up the tires in the race stint, and in qualifying, it's going to leave you hemorrhaging lap time. As for the third factor, we got top speed, we got traction, braking performance. Straight line braking is all important. Now, cars that are good at this in the GT3 category, the Lamborghini Huracan springs to mind immediately. At the moment, however, the first one of those is the Treble 6 down in 20th position. But in essence, anything mid-engined is able to keep some weight on the rear tyres, which around Red Bull Ring can be quite handy. So you'd be looking at the Ferraris and note the 2 McLarens inside the top 5, one of which we are following right now as he's a quarter of a second up. Can't quite get onto provisional pole, however, can Knudsen. He's now 23 thousandths of a second away. Here is a fan favourite, the Liam Nissan from Ernest's Limburgs, currently in 8th, about 8/10ths away. Drops down to 9th as he begins this lap. What's it like through turn number 1, however? The answer is pretty good. He's found of a 10th of a second already. Brogan Dyer, another driver to keep an eye on. Brogan didn't feature much last week. However, this week, good to see that yellow, white, and black Mustang. I do like the livery, I have to say. It's simple, but effective. 0 Point Racing, getting the nose in quite well through the left-handers. And this, let's not forget, is the part of the lap where your front-engine beasts will struggle a little bit compared to the McLarens, because they're set up for the straight line performance, because, as we touched on, a lot of this lap is going to be about straight line performance, but you get those 2 quick left-handers, which, in the front-engine cars, without too much downforce, can punish the front right tyre if you're not too careful. Out of the final corner comes Brogan Dyer. 0.3 of a second up could put him up towards the front row. It's the head of row number 2, however, with 7 minutes and 20 seconds remaining. Ernest Limburgs on a reasonable lap as well. The Nissan making progress towards the head of the field. Did get up towards the top 5, has dropped down, but is finding 0.4 of a second on this next lap and goes up into 5th once more. So we see a Nissan grace the top of the order. Worth noting that Vicente in a Ford leads the way. There's another one, Brogan Tire, not too far back. So they may not have got there on the first flying laps, but the Mustang's beginning to show quite good pace, as we would expect. Christoph Peterson, another driver we saw plenty of back at Paul Ricard. The Bentley seemed to be struggling for straight line speed there. Christophe instead setting the machine up for good speed through sectors 1 and 3 at Paul Ricard, which are very, very twisty. I think that was Josh Wood going off for a picnic somewhere on the inside of turn number 3. But Christophe Peterson this time round, I presume, is going to be getting the big Bentley slightly more geared towards straight line speed because there's not so much to gain from the twisty parts of the lap here. As such, you'll have that rear wing tuned well down. The car will be a bit more on the nose, which helps in the slow speed rotation as well. And Chase the Rabbit currently chasing one of the horses up in front. Could possibly be Brogan Dyer, who would be a very good reference for this lap. In fact, that Mustang peels off. So the slipstream and the reference has been given to Christophe Peterson. On the lap, he is a 10th, going on 2 tenths up at the moment, but gets a touch out of shape at the Jochen Rindt turn number 9. Now into the final corner of 10, has gathered it up. Did that cost him time? However, it did. So this may be an improvement, but if it is, it'll be by around about a thousandth of a second. In the end, he found 5 thousandths of a second, but of course, stays in 4th position. The field very packed together at the moment, but a reasonable sized gap back down the order. This Dariusz Schmilowicki trying to get himself a lovely little tow from the Toga Academy BMW just ahead, which will be punching a nice big hole in the air. Maybe not quite big enough for an SI GTR to fit in it, but certainly big enough to see some straight line speed advantage coming out of that one. Worth noting as well, if you're new to Toga Motorsport, my name is Tom Davis. I'll be taking you through all of this evening's action as Martin Varga gets all out of shape on the exit of 3. Uncharacteristically far off the pace at the moment is Martin Varga as well. He's in our Pro Series, Season 12 Rookie Wednesdays champion, dominant champion it should be said as well, but currently down in 21st position with an awful lot of work to do. What's this lap looking like for Martin? Finding 5 tenths, make it 6 as he gets towards the first of the left-handers, using all the road on entry as well. And it is now 6 tenths of a second that the Mustang is up. That would move him well up the order to the fringes of the top 10. So he could well half his deficit to the front at the moment, could Martin Varga. As I mentioned, my name is Tom Davis, and we should also call out the magnificent, the wonderful Mac, a fan favorite here at Toga Motorsport. He's bringing you all of the pictures, doing the hard work behind the scenes. So an early thank you to him in case we forget the late thank you at the end of what's bound to be an action-packed race. Martin Varga does move up the order, found a lot of time in the end of that lap as well, actually moves himself into 6th position. He was finding time all the way through the lap. I hope he's got enough tyres underneath him to go for another one. In theory, he could return to pits and put some new rubber on him. However, at the moment, it seems that he is staying out with 3 minutes remaining on the clock. So anybody crossing the line now will get 2 more efforts. As for the likes of Christophe Peterson, who we're watching now, Bentley within half a tenth of pole position, puts him on the second row, astonishingly. Christophe Peterson will get this one and one more. He's finding time, but only minimal amounts. The cars ahead of him, also thereabouts. Jakob Knudsen is under a tenth away from an improvement. Vicente at the top is right on top of his benchmark time of 1:27.4 as well. So we said this would be very close. It does currently seem to be the case. Mitchell Sterenberg, for reference, currently at the top of your Pro-Am cars. That Nissan followed quite quickly by Reese Aindo. So keep an eye on those guys. They're lurking 12th and 13th in the overall order right now, separated by just 0.03 of a second. This is Fabian Guilot, who has 0.4 of a second to find to get himself up onto that front row. 2 minutes to do it. That means he's got this lap and one more to go as well. And in turn, it'll be a case of getting the power down. What's Fabian's lap looking like? It's there or thereabouts. The improvements are not coming in big chunks anymore, folks. They are very, very marginal, with the possible exception of Matt Townsend. The 85 Mustang, currently 8th, is up by a quarter of a second. We'll stay with Fabian Guila at the moment, however, it goes a bit wide. So here's Matt Townsend. He too goes a bit wide as he just about kept in track limits he has. He's finding a quarter of a second here, which could put him up onto the 3rd row of the grid. It does. 5th position for Matt Townsend in the 85 Mustang, a factor all the way through round number 1, making himself a factor here at round number 2. Jakob Knudsen, meanwhile, needs to find 23 thousandths of a second, and he already found it through turn 1, but his exit was a touch compromised, and indeed Vicente out front is moving the goalposts ever so slightly further away from him on his possibly last attempt. Depends how far through it he is. No, Vicente will get one more after this. Knudsen, meanwhile, he himself could be pretty close to his last one if he gets held up by traffic at all here. And there are some cars, big group of them, in fact, just up the road. Here comes Knudsen hitting the brakes. The Dane closes right up onto the back of the 63 Barwell Lamborghini, has to back out of it, and he knows that's job done. He will be second at best. Vicente did move the benchmark away. He's now got his time down to this astonishing 27.3 out front that may just secure pole position. Here's Chris Wall. He's running in Pro-Am. You'll note that because his number has a grey background. He's currently 3rd in that Pro-Am categorization, but he's on an improving lap. A lot of drivers finding time as one of the Toga racing cars bails out the way. He'll catch this Porsche on exit 2, although it may in the end just give him a bit of a tow. What's the lap look like for Chris Wall? He's found a 10th of a second. And he goes across the line, but does not find any positions with that one. 16th overall, 3rd in class as it stands. The clock has hit 0. Fabian Guilot approaches the line. He's finding a quarter of a second, improves to 5th position ahead of Matt Townsend and at the head of row number 3. Here's Victor Vicente. He is making his way along what is going to be effectively the last long straight, because he's got 9 and 10 in quick succession now. He's already down to a 27.3. He's found some time, but he loses it in the penultimate corner, goes straight on at 10. That said, I don't think anybody behind is finding enough time to challenge him. Reese Aindo will be 2nd in the semi-pros. The last car on track finding notable improvements is Martin Varga, who's up by about a 10th of a second, but drops it at the final corner. And as a result, will not go any quicker. We have got Vladimir Butko out on circuit. He's up by almost half a second here, actually. That could challenge the car just up the road from him. He cuts the beam, and I think he might have invalidated there at the last corner, and so his time will not count. What a grid we have lined up for you then. It'll be Vicente from pole position, Jakob Knudsen, and the rest of the grid coming in just a moment. In a red Ferrari, and I believe that was the car he was in last week, but obviously swapping machinery across to the number 5 Porsche. Then it's Brandon Fuller in 36th, and heading up the next row of the grid, you will find Pavlovsky in the 396. 6-9 McLaren. Then we got Budko and Ursi, pair of BMWs on row number 17. And moving forwards onto row number 16, another graduate from the rookies heads it in 31st. It's Sadok in 32nd. It is Kuth in the 63 Barwell Lamborghini. We go up one further row. We're looking at Sepe Lagoon in that 550 McLaren. He's just ahead of Jack Vetka. Remember, Sepe Lagoon leading the semi-pro standings, starts in 29th overall. David Roth in that fantastic 488 Ferrari. That livery gets better every week, I'm sure of it. He, alongside him, has Wouter Gossai. Then we're getting on to Murrell and Josh Wood, 25th and 26th. In 23rd position, you'll find Gabriel Schmidt. He shares a row with Kaperkovic in the Lamborghini. 22nd, Bruno Battaglin. He was involved in several battles last week next to Juhas in the treble 6 Huracan. We go on inside the top 20 now. It is Salvatore Amato in the 103 Ferrari who kicks us off, just ahead of Taran, the Ukrainian, in the 101 Mustang. It's an old Mustang, row number 9 as well. Vlazovic sharing it with the 17th positioned Christopher Wall. Then another one, a key member of our Toga Motorsport Academy and indeed Toga Racing, well, general community, Reese Aindo and Opalaka. Then we get Oreshkin and Pateron, 13th and 14th, and a pair of Nissans, Mitchell Sterenberg and Shmelovitsky in 11th and 12th. Top 10 is kicked off by Sergei Tumara in that McLaren. Then you got Limburgs, Nedorazov, Martin Varga in 7th, and Matt Townsend in 6th. Fabian Guilot kicks off your top 5, heading up row number 3. And then it's the front 2 rows, Dyer and Pettersson, Knudsen and Vicente heading up the field. This could be a round that turns the championship on its head. Coming out of Paul Ricard, remember, it was Fabian Guilot that headed the way. He's down in 5th position. Jakob Knudsen up on the front row. And Sergei Tumara just about scraping into the top 10 of qualifying with work to do. As for the semi-pros, it's much the same. Plenty of action coming up over the next 90 minutes. As a result of qualifying incidents, those will be for some combination of contact and impeding, of course. This short formation lap means that it's all about a bit of weaving, bit of brake heating as well, because that'll then radiate through into the tire and actually heat it, air to canvas to rubber, rather than the other way around, which can, if you're not careful, result in a little bit of graining. The start's going to be an interesting one here too, because at Paul Ricard, you knew full well there was a long straight coming up, and so you were almost setting up the slipstream off of that first lap. We come here now, it's a little bit different. It's going to be ever so slightly, what would you say, more chaotic, because sure, there's a long straight coming up, but there's another one after that, and so on and so forth. So if you're going to make overtakes, you might as well get on with them. So Mustang heading the field from McLaren. You'd expect the Mustang to have the advantage, but the McLaren will get a slipstream. Also quite good starts traditionally from the McLaren as well. So we'll keep an eye on that one. The second row could be a super interesting one as well, with Bentley and Ford Mustangs. So you got to feel a little bit for Knudsen. He'll need all the temperature he can get in that rear left tire so that he, well, has the best chance of accelerating out of turn 1. For the number 45 car, for reference, the 5-second penalty was for overtaking. Here at Toga, you are not allowed to overtake a car that is on a flying lap during the qualifying session, and there was significant contact for which the 103 was deemed responsible. That's why Salvatore Amato comes into this race with a 15-second penalty. As the cars form up 2 by 2, we've got a 90-minute race. Mandatory pit stop in the middle where you must take fuel and tires, so they will be treating it like 2 back-to-back 45-minute sprints. We're about to start minute 1, however. Victor Vicente leading the field through the final corner. Then it will be all eyes up to the lights, whereas we round turn number 10, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 red lights ablaze on the gantry. And now we wait. The The tension builds. So too do the revs in just a moment or two. 5 red lights ablaze. They go green, and we go racing. Good start from Victor Vicente, but not as good as Jakob Knudsen. Watch the Bentley on the outside. Gets blocked off, and so it's going to be position gained immediately for Brogan Dyer, as it's all Mustang battling it out behind what is now the leading McLaren. Great start from the number 20. We saw a similar sort of thing back at Paul Ricard, in fact, so Jakob's got a grip on his reaction time, but as expected, he's now coming under threat as the front engine monsters pull themselves up alongside on the outside, however, because Jakob Knudsen's covered off that inside line. Nobody's getting past him on the run towards turn 3. To be honest, there's carnage in the background as well, so we'll keep an eye on that one. So then, yes, I think you lost me for a moment there. Yes, thank you very much. Jakob Knudsen it is that leads on the opening lap. He's managed to cover off that first place, which he gained on the start, of course, which I find mightily impressive. The question is, how long can he keep it? Because the two Mustangs are staying very, very close indeed. There's not a huge hole punch by that McLaren, but to be honest, they might not need it, because here they come, closing up to turn number 1, and they do the sensible thing. Set it up for turn number 3, up the hill. Here comes the Ford performance power. A huge amount of it for that Ford Mustang as well. Unrestricted, it'll produce over 550 brake horsepower. Force to the outside once again will probably lead to decent traction off the corner, however. Does Brogan Dyer get involved? No, he does not. And as expected, that Ford Mustang gets great run, great momentum, and is able to start hauling. It'll be the outside of turn number 4 when they get to the bottom of the hill, however. And so it's still advantage Jakob Knudsen. Here comes Vicente. He's on the outside. It'll be very, very brave to make that one stick. And he's not quite able to in the corner. He might be able to get it on the run out of the corner, however, because here comes the Ford to the inside of turn number 6. And still the McLaren holds on all the way, hanging it out to dry at the long left-hander. Sets up an entry into the next left-hander, but you feel like this could be a matter of time at the moment, because how on earth is Knudsen going to break the toe? A toe that's notable as they even head up just the very, very short neck straight. So we'll see how that one gets on as they continue their way around the lap. Lap 1's completed. Lap 2 is about to be completed. And as the two Mustangs don't find a way through, it's, to the eye at least, much closer between 3rd and 4th position. Don't count out championship leader Fabian Guilot is up the inside, I think, almost in avoidance. Goes Brogan Dyer. Contact between the two Mustangs. Vicente, your pole sitter, is off, and Knudsen will be having a song and a dance inside that McLaren. It's fantastic for him. We asked the question, how will he break the toe? I suppose he doesn't have to, because Brogan Dyer has broken it for him. Dyer's going to be vulnerable here to the championship leader and to the big Bentley. We'll go back and take a quick look at the aftermath of that. It seems to me like Dyer's gotten away with it. Vicente, however, spun to the infield of turn number 1. All of that set up an overtaking opportunity for Christoph in the Bentley. Peterson had the inside line, and he has made it stick now down towards turn number 4 with the Aston Martin of Guilot looking ever hungry to get by. Remember that Fabian at Paul Ricard had to fight his way through the field, so this is not unfamiliar territory for him. Through 6 we go then. All of that chaos has brought none other than Martin Varga back to play as well, as if we thought he wouldn't be a factor. For most of qualifying, he was sitting way, way down the order, looking at, what was it, around about 20th place for a while. Suddenly, he finds himself inside the top 5. This is Salvatore Mato. He's got that 15-second penalty for serious contact during the qualifying session. But now, however, on the circuit with the track position, sitting second in semi-pro, albeit a couple of pro ahead of him before he finds the leader, Mitchell Sterenberg, who has himself locked pretty well onto the back of the pro drivers, and we'll see how that one develops as we get through the race. Christoph Peterson, we saw his move on Brogan Dyer. The question is, is he going to be able to hold it? Because Dyer is closing once more up to turn number 3. Not close enough. Thinks better of it. Maybe, if we're imagining what happened to him down at turn number 1 just a lap or so ago, it could leave him vulnerable to the Aston Martin, however. An Aston Martin, remember, that has a very favourable balance of performance here at the Red Bull Ring. Is it close enough on the brakes? No, not quite. Takes a slightly wider line, however, setting up the exit out of 4 through what is technically turn 5 here, through the right-handed bend more than a corner. And you get towards 6, nobody close enough to try and overtake. And indeed, at this stage in the race, we wouldn't really expect them to either. It's when we get later on where that becomes a genuinely viable opportunity. We lot looking pretty racy here, and most importantly, Dyer not looking like he's got the pace of the cars ahead. And it seems to me that Christoph Peterson in the Bentley's getting away by just a car length or 2. The same can be said, actually, of Fabian Guilot, who's closing up to the rear, and your race leader, who is getting further and further into the distance all the time that these guys fight it out, as Liam Neeson goes up the inside just behind this pair. That's one that I know will make the various streams really quite happy. He's going to give it another go. It's Martin Varga he's trying to get the move done on. Has he got the move done on him? Well, possibly, although he's gone well beyond the edge of the circuit, it should be said. The stewards may take a look at that one, as there's yet more chaos for second position. That's Brogan Dyer pulling off the road. What happened to him? Hits the brakes, closes up to the back, and hits the second place car for the second time in this race. At that point, the Bentley's still spinning round, collides with Fabian Guilot, championship leader, and Martin Varga is there to capitalize. That moves him into third position. The 86 Mustang that looked nowhere for 14 of 15 minutes in qualifying finds himself in the podium positions, into second place, I correct myself, and now could look to set himself off to Jakob Knudsen, who'll have no idea that any of this is happening behind him. Absolutely fantastic racing so far. Varga from Peterson is second and third. Once again, Peterson looking pretty racy, although I'll be astounded if he's not got some front-end damage after the heavy collision with Fabian Guilot, who himself is still running in 5th spot at this stage, at least. That lap from all of your front runners, of course, pretty shocking, it should be noted. They've dropped 2 to 3 seconds to race leader Jakob Knudsen as a result of all the shenanigans up at turn number 3. Ernest Limburgs did manage to capitalize, finds himself in 4th, which is outstanding for the Nissan GTR. 4th may become 5th in a moment or two, however, because here comes the championship leader, being involved in strife, but fighting back straight away to the inside of 3. Job done. Try and hook up a bit of slipstream from the Bentley whilst he's at it, and it leaves us with a civil war now between the two Nissans, assuming that Ernest Limburgs isn't able to come straight back at the championship leader. Thinks about it, goes to the outside, opens up the door, in fact, to the second of our Nissans. That's Chmielewski, and Chmielewski thinks about having a go here. He's already had the Nissan. He's having a look now at the Aston Martin as Sergei Tamara begins to become a factor up the inside of the Lian Nissan. That blue McLaren had an interesting race back at Paul Ricard, was leading the way, then dropped back, and then came through once more. So if Sergei can find some consistency of lap times, he may yet be a consideration for the podium positions. The other thing we should touch in on before we get too far after the end of this lap is that only a lap ago, Vincent Vicente, the pole sitter, set the fastest lap of the race. He is down in 12th position, but he is making sure that he's moving forwards. The recovery drive has begun for Vincent after what was relatively minor contact with quite a significant consequence down at turn number 1 between himself and the, well, possibly now retired Ford Mustang that was challenging for that position. Indeed, Brogan Dyer in the pits for now at least. We'll wait and see whether he comes back out at a later date. As for your semi-pros, still Mitchell Sternberg leading the way from Salvatore Amato. Remember, Amato has that 15-second penalty. Christopher Wall sitting in 3rd, and all those guys relatively spaced out. So we'll stay tuned on this battle at the pro class and indeed overall well, I was going to say lead, second place, because Knudsen has extended his margin once more on this lap. It's gone from 5.5 seconds up to 6.5 seconds as it continues to oscillate. Martin Varga is in second place. He, let's not forget, was fourth place in the championship coming into him. The car challenging him, that Bentley, fifth place after P5 at Paul Ricard. So in round 2 of the championship, all of these guys will be thinking about points scoring because there are a lot of races coming up after this one. I cannot believe that all of that action has happened just in the space of 11 minutes as well. So plenty still to come, I expect, as we get into the deeper stages of this one, as Martin Varga goes to the middle of the road. It's not a complete defense, but it's just enough to discourage a lunge up the inside from Christoph Peterson, who I suspect was thinking about it, but thought better of it in the end. Peterson's going to be the factor here. He looks as if he's got the pace on Martin Varga, as once again Martin Varga goes to the middle of the road, this time on the approach to turn number 3. How late on the brakes is Peterson? He does commit to that outside line. It should give him reasonable traction off the corner, although the Mustang, to be fair, is no slouch on getting back to the throttle, the right pedal. So they'll accelerate downhill this time to turn number 4. The inside is available for Peterson, but the descent is steeper. He doesn't commit on the brakes. It allows Fabian Guilot to become a factor once again, who's bringing with him Chmielewski. Sergei Tamara not too far behind these guys. Future first Ferrari is just about visible in the background of that shot. That's Pateron in the 16 car running in 8th. Knudsen continuing to put in solid laps. Last time around he did a 28.3 compared to a 28.9 for Martin Varga and a 28.6 for Peterson. And this is why I think it's important for Peterson to try and clear this Ford Mustang, because even if Martin Varga clings onto the back of him, he's obviously got more pace through the corners than the Ford. And so for Martin Varga, it may be better to let him through and try and use that slipstream to close back up to Knudsen, who at the moment is running away with this. Personal best lap on his previous tour, has started this one pretty well as well. This is Matt Townsend. We're going to get a replay of what happened here between himself and the Toga Nissan. He was looking to move past Mitchell Sterenberg and does move past Mitchell Sterenberg. Those two in different classes. Townsend in the Pro class, Sterenberg in the Pro-Am. But for Townsend, it means that his next overtake will be for positioning classes. Meanwhile, Christoph Peterson has gone from offense to defense, because here comes Fabian Guilot. He's up the inside. He's confident on the brakes. He's got the position as well. That one for third spot. It's Guilot that moves up one further place in the order. For Guilot, this is a pattern we've seen before, and I can't help but feel that Martin Varga will be hearing the Jaws theme in his head, because we saw Guilot down the back end of the front group at Paul Ricard. It took him the first third or so of the race to get some clean air, and then he hauled in Jakob Knudsen for the race lead, an eventual race victory. At the moment, we seem to be following that same pattern, and I wonder if Guilot's just a bit more of a wily operator. He's happy to sit in the traffic, he's happy to not push the tyres too hard, I presume, as well, and instead deploy that pace at a later stage. Vicente, for reference, has gained another position. He's now back into the overall top 10 and has done the fastest lap of the race, down to a 28.0. We may yet see our first 1:27 of the race from Vicente before too long. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually gets back up towards Martin Varga. Those two have significantly different lap times at this stage. Back out of turn 3 once again then. Turn with all sorts of moments from the Formula 1 calendar, and if you're a fan of DTM with your GT racing, you'll have known all sorts of moments from 3 into 4 in that as well. Here comes Vicente trying to make yet another move. The green Mustang is driven by Vincent, and he gets around the outside of Matt Townsend into turn number 4. Matt won't mind that too much. Vicente, of course, very quick and recovering, as we see Sadok going around the outside of Gabriel Schmidt. That one's not going to work out. They're fighting around about the midfield of the semi-pro order. It's Sadok in the Porsche, Schmidt in the Ford Mustang. The Porsche, a tricky beast around here, because we know that car lacks top speed. course, the BOP will consider that, but it's got pretty good traction. So if you can find a nice balance, it is there for you, but it's certainly a bit more finicky than, say, for example, the Mustang, or as it seems, the McLarens, which are having a pretty good outing, which I'm not sure many of those drivers expected when we spoke to them after the race last week. Remember, this is Toga Motorsport. There's all sorts of events here at Toga, so if you're listening in on the stream, as we see Pavlovsky trying to get up the inside, or around the outside, sorry, of Turan, who's not having quite such a good race. It'll be Turan that comes out on top in that little squabble. If you're new here to Toga Motorsport, you're listening in, you're having a good time. Firstly, it's great to have you. Secondly, remember, you can get involved. That can be as simple as subscribing to the YouTube, following on the Twitch, hitting follow on TikTok, those sorts of things. It can also be a case of the driver of the day vote, where you can vote with ! vote space and then the car number that you think should win driver of the day. Give a little bit of pride to somebody when we speak to them after the race. Or in turn, if you're watching this and thinking, I fancy a go at this, there are plenty of series on offer, including this week, because tomorrow we're kicking off Season 14 of the Rookies Championship, where the pace is a bit more beginner-friendly. We'll come back to that in just a moment, because former Rookies Champion back in Season 12 finds himself with a bit of pressure. Up the inside comes Fabian Guilot. It was only a lap or so ago he passed the Bentley. Now he's challenging the Ford. Can't quite make it stick through 9 and 10, but it may be a matter of time rather than a matter of if for Fabian Guilot, who's tucked into the slipstream, closing up towards 1. This could be one for turn number 3. He's so late on the brakes, super confident, despite following another car, despite having the dirty air as a factor. And here he comes, Varga over in the dirt, trying to, I think, make it quite clear he plans on defending this one. The Mustang's got the legs up the straight, as it's to the inside and late to the inside from Fabian Guilot. He'll get an overlap, but his exit is going to be compromised as a result of that. And Christoph Petzen will be licking his lips. He's thinking, I could hook up a slipstream here, try and get myself back onto those podium positions. And here comes the Bentley for third spot to the outside of Fabian Guilot. No way through on this time of asking, but he is just beginning to knock on the doors. There's a slide on power for Martin Varga, which is a touch concerning considering he's only 18 minutes into what's going to be a 45-minute stint. Indeed, Guilot's beginning to chance his luck up the inside of turn number 6. Back to what we were saying a moment ago, though. If you are fancying to go with Toga Motorsport, you're thinking this looks great fun. Rookie Wednesdays Season 14 kicks off tomorrow, so that's if you're around 103, 104% pace, or possibly even a little bit slower than that. Great community to be involved with. If you're fancying slightly more one-off style events or some special events, there is the 5,000 member Sprint Challenge as well happening on Saturday. And of course, longer term, there's a mini endurance championship and an endurance championship that we're running. Not to mention, there's plenty going on the likes of Le Mans Ultimate as well, for example. So get over to SimGrid, look up Toga Motorsport, join the Discord as well, and you'll be able to not only stay up to date with the action from a streaming perspective, but you'll be able to be on circuit, possibly even tomorrow night. Although I know that lap times for qualification do have to be put in by 9 PM, so you might want to get on that for Rookie Wednesdays. For now, however, we are, of course, looking at the Pro Series, Season 1 of this, round number 2, and this is Gabriel Schmidt, who is involved in a late, should we call it a kerfuffle last week? There was certainly some controversy there. There could be some controversy here as we watch a replay of the Bentley and the Nissan into turn number 3. Nissan off the road was possibly left space there. I mean, there was enough to have a couple of millimeters of tyre on the correct side of the white line, but not much more than that. Sergei Tamara seizes up a move to the inside of turn number 6, but is not close enough to Dariusz to make that one. And I think he will have had one eye in the mirror, actually, just about, what should we say, spotting the likes of Ilya Nissan behind. Interestingly, Vincent Vicente at some point has had it not quite go his way. He'd made his way back up into the top 10, let us not forget, but now the pole sitter, following an incident, of course, that dropped him down the field, has actually dropped down a little bit once more to 13th position, so recovery drive not exactly going to plan for Vincent. Haven Motorsports' Sergei Tamara, however, is executing the plan quite well. Qualified in 10th spot, Bit of a bump and a barge at the apex, although that was by no means his fault. He stuck it as close to the sausage curb as he dared in that McLaren. And now he's going to play a drag race against two Nissans. And you have got to feel for Sergey here. One to the left, one to the right. Sergey is in a sandwich, but in a different sense to normal. How late on the brakes is Tamara? The answer's pretty late. There's maybe a smidge of a touch as they round the apex of turn number 3. And it's a drag race once again towards turn number 4. And there's no chance Tamara's holding that out on a second occasion. Tucks into the slipstream, and this is the problem with the McLaren, because as soon as he's on the offense, he's back on the defense as he has to cover off the inside to turn number 4, closes up in the mid corner, and there's nowhere to go. It's the age-old Yamaha problem if you've got any MotoGP fans watching this one today. They're quick in the mid corner, but if there's something stopped on the apex ahead of them, they're going to have to hit the brakes as well, as we get a couple of penalties coming in, including one for Sergey Tamara. 20 seconds worth of penalty for him. Safe to say that is a pretty significant one, and will impact him come the second half of the race, because I presume he's going to serve that in his pit stop. In fact, a whole heap of penalties coming in. So we've got a warning going the way of car number 12. No penalty for that one yet. Car number 85 has got 10 seconds for erratic defensive moves. Car number 701, 20 seconds for minor contact position gain. 20 seconds to the treble 6. Again, minor contact position gained. And same 5 seconds for minor position not gained to the 488, which is one of the best liveries in the grid. Those big 20-second penalties for efforts came on lap number 1, where penalties are doubled here at Toga Motorsport, trying to encourage clean lap 1 racing. Then you get through the order, and there's a ton more penalties. We got 15 seconds for the 24, 5 seconds for the 45, 10 seconds for the 550 coming. The 24 has a further 5 seconds for minor contact. There was a warning for a minor tap given to the number 5 car. Sergey Tamara is once again side by side, this time with a second of the Nissans. All sorts of dirt kicked up. It seemed like a couple of the cars behind went off in sympathy there, but Tamara will hold off the second of the Nissans, Ernest Limburg's, albeit he's not been able to close back up to Dariush just up the road. In turn, we'll round out these penalties. The 612, 5 seconds for forcing another car off track. The 101, 10 seconds for significant contact later on in the race, i.e. after lap 1. As we look at Fabian Guillot now closing in on Martin Varga. He's been there for a couple laps longer than I expected him to be. And this is a really important one to keep an eye on, because every lap that Guillot is behind Varga is a lap he's losing time to Jakob Knudsen. He's aware of that, and he closes still up towards turn number 1. Quite find a way through, but what was previously 5.5 seconds is now doubled to 11 between Martin Varga and your race leader. And that's getting on properly difficult regions for anybody to close, because even if you're a couple of tenths quicker than Knudsen, you're going to have to put in a big shift to close down 11 seconds or more, let us not forget, by the time we reach the end of this next lap, where Guillot still isn't able to pass this Ford Mustang. If it was to finish as it was right now, or at least if we were to see Fabian Guillot get ahead of Martin Varga before the finish, you'd then see two cars possibly tied on points between Fabian Guillot and Jakob Knudsen. So it's good for us, the spectators, watching this one. Not quite so good for Fabian, who will fancy a go at the lead. Knudsen showing that in the early stage of the race he's got plenty of pace, although we did see that fade towards the pit stops last Tuesday. So there's a chance we see the same once again. You will also have spotted that the field is just beginning to spread out that little bit more, as here comes Fabian Guillot. He's tried into 9 before, this time not able to. I reckon he might be setting it up for 10. Is there a lunge on the brakes? No, there is not. It was almost Andrea Dovizioso style there, but that's maybe one for the last lap, not with over an hour left of racing on the clock. But yes, you will have noticed that the field is beginning to spread out just that touch more than it was in the early stages. Obviously a big gap between first and second, fourth and fifth a touch more separated, and indeed 8th and 9th. Then the cars towards the tail end of the order are generally more split up. Notably, Jack Vetka and Brandon Fuller having quite a nice battle down the order in 28th and 29th. Those two, for reference, are in the semi-pro classification, however, so they'll be thinking about positions in class, as we see Chris Wall currently 12th He was 13th just a moment ago, however, because he's just gone around the outside of Oreshkin. Oreshkin not quite able to fend him off in that BMW, which has an awful lot of ballast added to it as part of the low fuel motorsport balance of performance. Back to the front, however, you can't help feel that this one is brewing, and brew and brew and brew it might, but eventually your cup of tea gets a little bit too strong and has that weird aftertaste. Guilot will be aware of that weird aftertaste because it's effectively the gap that's opening up ahead of Martin Varga to the race leader. So for Fabian, he needs to find a way through, and yet somehow a V8 Vantage is not able to clear the Ford Mustang just up ahead of him. The V8 Vantage, 4-litre twin turbo V8. He'll be able to hear it, albeit he's got damage on the front. Is this the move now into one? No, it's not. And I wonder if that damage on the front end is making him just a touch more cautious. Maybe he's struggling with understeer. Maybe he's aware that if it doesn't get stopped immediately, he's not going to be able to get it anywhere near the apex. This time, however, he does have the overlap. He's gaining a touch of the side draft. He's going to be super close into 3. A late move to defend against Christoph Peterson in the Bentley, who gets all sorts of out of shape. But in a turn, it opens up the opportunity to move for second position. We saw a penalty earlier on for forcing off the racetrack. Do you think that Martin Varga was forced off the racetrack there? The stewards will certainly have a look. As meanwhile, Christoph Peterson in the Bentley challenges to move up into third. Is that Sergei Tamara making moves on Chmielewski further back in the pack as well? He was given a go, and finally Tamara is ahead of not one, but 2 Nissans. In turn, you've got Pateron just behind in 8th position, first of your Ferraris, who's now got the unenviable task of trying to pass the Japanese giants. This is going to be an absolutely critical middle part of the lap for Tamara. You get the sense that the 701 has good pace if he can get clear air. Clear air is going to be purely dependent on whether or not a Nissan's in his slipstream on the run towards turn number 3. And at least for now, it looks as if Darius behind is going to be very, very close indeed. Although the McLaren's good through 9, it's better through 10. The gap opens up just that little bit more. Sergei Tamara, 0.4 of a second was his advantage across the line. It comes down towards turn number 1. He's going to need great traction out of this one as the Nissan looms large in the mirrors. This is the lap for Sergei Tamara's race. If he can survive up to 3, he'll probably survive down to 4 as well, and he gets a whole lap to try and open up the margin over the cars he's been, well, treading water behind for the last half an hour. On the brakes into 3. He's safe. He's away from the Nissans. He's up on the sausage curb on exit, though, and that won't help him. Maybe there's one more chance for Darius Chmielewski in the 69 Nissan GTR. Is he close enough to challenge into 4? No, he's not. He tucks into the racing line, and now Sergei Tamara will have to be eyes forward because he's got a golden opportunity to try and close onto the back of what is the podium battle between Fabian Guilot, Martin Varga, and Christoph Peterson. Guilot, who of course has now found a way through on Martin Varga for second place. Peterson yet to replicate that feat. In 9th position, you'll find this 27 car, Mitchell Sterenberg. Sterenberg, for a long time, had a bit of a buffer. He had a couple of pro cars behind him before you reach second place in the Pro-Am categorization. However, your Pro-Am leader now has company, because Salvatore Almato is right